European migrant crisis motivations. European migrant crisis motivations. The European migrant crisis refers to an enormous and unprecedented wave both of refugees from the Syria, a flow that was immediately joined by a far larger number of economic migrants from the Near East and Africa. The European migrant crisis refers to an enormous and unprecedented wave both of refugees from the Syria, a flow that was immediately joined by a far larger number of economic migrants from the Near East and Africa. Refugee crisis. Refugees are people forced to flee their country of origin because of persecution, war, or violence. According to the UNHCR, the number of forcibly displaced people worldwide reached 65,600,000 at the end of 2016, the highest level since World War II, with a 40% increase taking place since 2011. Of these 65,600,000, 22.5 million were refugees, 17.2 million under UNHCR's mandate, plus 5.3 million Palestinian refugees under UNRWA's mandate. 2.8 million of the refugees were asylum seekers. The rest were persons displaced within their own countries, internally displaced persons. The 17.2 million refugees under UNHCR's mandate were around 2.9 million more than at the end of 2014, the highest level since 1992. Among them, Syrian refugees became the largest refugee group in 2014, 3.9 million, 1.55 million more than the previous year, overtaking Afghan refugees, 2.6 million, who had been the largest refugee group for 3 decades. 6 of the 10 largest countries of origin of refugees were African: Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Central African Republic and Eritrea. Developing countries hosted the largest share of refugees, 86% by the end of 2014, the highest figure in more than 2 decades. The least developed countries alone provided asylum to 25% of refugees worldwide. Even though most Syrian refugees were hosted by neighboring countries such as Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, the number of asylum applications lodged by Syrian refugees in Europe steadily increased between 2011-17. By December 2017, UNHCR had counted over 1 million asylum applications in 37 European countries, including both the EU members and non-members. As of 2017, 55% of refugees worldwide came from 3 nations: South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Syria. Of all displaced peoples, 17% of them are being hosted in Europe. As of April 2018, 15,481 refugees have successfully arrived to the shores of Europe via sea within the first few months of the year alone. There was an estimated 500 that have died in this year alone. In 2015, there was a total of 1.02 million arrivals by sea. Since then, the influx has steadily decreased but is ongoing nonetheless. Syria. The greatest number of refugees fleeing to Europe originate from Syria. Their migration stems from severe socio-political oppression under President Bashar al-Assad. Civil war ensued with clashes between pro- and anti-government groups. Anti-government forces were supported by external governments, including US and UK, in an effort to topple the Syrian government by a classified program such as Timber Sycamore that effectively delivered thousands of tons of weaponry to rebel groups. In 2011, a group of Syrians displayed at pro-democracy protests in the city of Deraa. President Assad responded with force and consequently, more protests were triggered nationwide against the Assad regime. By July 2011, hundreds of thousands of people were protesting against President Assad. Early insurgency was put into effect to mitigate these uprisings, however, these measures were met with more unrest. By May 2011, thousands of people have already fled the country and the first refugee camps opened in Turkey. In March 2012, the UNHCR decided to appoint a regional refugee coordinator for Syrian refugees, recognizing the growing concerns surrounding the crisis. Just a year later, in March 2013, the number of Syrian refugees reached 1 million. By December 2017, UNHCR counted 1 million asylum applications for Syrian refugees in the European Union. As of March 2018, UNHCR has counted nearly 5.6 million registered Syrian refugees worldwide. Afghanistan. Afghan refugees comprise the second largest refugee population in the world. According to the UNHCR, There are almost 2.5 million registered refugees from Afghanistan. Most of these refugees have fled the region due to war and persecution. The majority have resettled in Pakistan and Iran, but it is becoming increasingly common to migrate further west to the European Union. Afghanistan has faced nearly 40 years of conflict dating back to the Soviet invasion in 1979. Since then, the nation has faced fluctuating levels of civil war amidst unending unrest. The increase in refugee numbers has been credited primarily to the Taliban presence within Afghanistan. Their retreat in 2001 led to nearly 6 million Afghan refugees returning to their homeland. However, after civil unrest and fighting alongside the Taliban's return, nearly 2.5 million refugees have fled Afghanistan. Most Afghan refugees, however, seek refuge in the neighboring nation of Pakistan. Increasing numbers, though, have committed to the strenuous migration to Turkey and the European Union. Economic asylum. For long, economic migration has been a global issue. Such migration is pursued in order to seek living conditions/standards and job opportunities that do not exist in the migrant's country of origin. These migrants are termed migrant workers by the United Nations. According to the OECD, over the last 10 years, migrants accounted for over 70% of the increase in Europe's workforce. The OECD has reported that such immigration is actually crucial to the growing labor market, filling 15% of the entries into the fastest-growing occupations. Overall, the OECD has found that the inflow of migrants has not greatly disrupted any nation's GDP. Islamic State. In 2016, according to the daily La Stampa, officials from Europol conducted an investigation into the trafficking of fake documents for ISIL. They have identified fake Syrian passports in the refugee camps in Greece that were destined to supposed members of ISIS, in order to avoid Greek government controls and make their way to other parts of Europe. Also, the chief of Europol said that a new task force of 200 counter-terrorism officers will be deployed to the Greek islands alongside Greek border guards in order to help Greece stop a strategic-level campaign by Islamic State to infiltrate terrorists into Europe. In 2017, British newspaper The Guardian reported that ISIL is paying the smugglers fees of up to $2,000 to child migrants in a desperate attempt to radicalize children for the group. The reports by Quilliam indicate that an estimated 88,300 unaccompanied children, who are reported as missing, are at risk of radicalization by the Islamic State.